Returnal is a perfect example of give and take, but not in the best sense. The game has fast and fluid movement, but is over-reliant on its health economy, which makes the overall combat experience more frustrating than satisfying. Each weapon feels unique and has interesting modifiers that further alter their functionality, on top of having solid sound design and hit feedback. But they're all tied to an active reload system that is permanently bound to your fire key, with no grace period between your final shot and the start of the reload. Boom, 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 boom. What? Did the reload? I hope I don't have to explain why that's annoying. The vast majority of power scaling in a run comes from items that give bonuses like money disappears 1 second slower or plus 10% weapon damage, but each pickup is either conditional or comes with a direct downside like deal 50% less damage while airborne or take damage when picking up items. Take damage while picking up loot in a roguelike. And most importantly, when you do finally get into that combat zen where everything is just flowing naturally and you're totally engaged, you're done. You've killed everything in that room. Now it's time to look around and explore the room for twice the amount of time that you spent actually killing things in it. Oh, and you're gonna need to backtrack to actually progress your run. A lot. If you're just here for the final verdict, I don't recommend Returnal for $60, that's for sure. Returnal is more of a $30 game, $40 at most. Wait for a sale. It does do plenty of things right. The shooting, the environments, the enemy design, that makes it an overall compelling game, but it is far from being the game changer that I can only presume that the developers wanted it to be given its price tag. Go play Risk of Rain 2 instead if you want to experience a top-of-the-line roguelike shooter. Anyway, let's get a little more in depth now, starting with the story. It's time travel. That's all there is to it. I cannot take a story seriously when all of its plot points revolve around something that does not and will never exist. It's not compelling to try and figure out why there's a 1970s American farmhouse in the middle of an alien swamp planet, and it's not esoteric to try and connect the dots as to why Among Us is knocking on my front door. Oh, Among Us! It's just boring. On top of that, the main character may as well be a husk in a spacesuit because her only purpose is to spout the most obvious exposition out loud to you as if the game thinks you're playing it blind. Like, not playing with no prior knowledge, I mean literally playing with your eyes closed. Oh, what the heck? That's my house.
That can't be here.
You don't say. Point being, I didn't care about the story, and I doubt you will either. Environments and enemy designs are actually really good. Clear alien inspiration with a little bit of Lovecraft sprinkled in, and I'm sure others too. Everything has that larger-than-life feel to it, which is exactly what I'm looking for in a sci-fi experience. Each biome provides enough of a different feel in both their traversal and enemy variety that you won't ever feel like you're doing the exact same thing, just with a different coat of paint. It's not exactly Elden Ring level of unique, but it doesn't need to be because it's a roguelike, and roguelikes are all about the combat and the loot. I actually just lied to you. Returnal isn't a roguelike, it's a Metroidvania with a separate roguelike mode added on top. I'll go over that separate mode here in a bit though. Make no mistake, the base Returnal experience is a narrative one that expands with your continued exploration, just instead of using the norm of save points, it instead packs everything into a roguelike format where dying resets your progress minus a handful of permanent upgrades like an enhanced dash or a grapple hook. Also, once you beat the first two biomes, which entail Act 1, dying will put you at the start of the third biome or Act 2 instead of all the way back to the beginning. It's an interesting way to handle both progression formats for sure. But how does this tie into the combat and the loot, Mr. Streamer? You just told me we were going to talk about the combat and the loot. Hey, all right, okay, geez, relax, I'm getting to it. The mixture of both Metroidvania and roguelike progression unfortunately detracts heavily from the combat and the loot in Returnal. It's honestly to the point where I can't help but feel that this game would be significantly better if it had stuck to only one of the two. Either go all in with the narrative, backtracking, exploration-based side, or simply make it Risk of Rain 3. Instead, we have this hybrid experience that doesn't exemplify the qualities from either of its foundations. And this is seen no clearer than in its general combat loop and power progression through items. See this as well? Oh, huge consumable, massive. Repairs a minor amount. All right. As I said earlier, the combat is pretty dang fun, but you're spending more time in a run going from room to room than you do actually fighting in those rooms. Why? And again, the active reload mechanic, which the game calls overload, it's tied to the same keybind as firing your weapon. Why? I know this sounds like I'm nitpicking, but in an action game that relies on split-second decisions to dodge enemy attacks and tosses upwards of 10 enemies at you simultaneously, what possible explanation is there for interrupting the flow of combat so egregiously and so so often. It's even stranger to me that no one on the dev team thought to add a separate keybind for the active reload when your starting weapon is a freaking semi-auto pistol that fires as fast as you can click. I wonder what will happen when I inevitably run out of ammo for this gun that clearly is made to be spam fired. Truly a mystery. It is such a simple feature that the fact that it's not implemented means it's either A, an oversight, or B, an intentional design choice, neither of which are good things. Fire, alt fire, focusing, melee, consumable, interact, blah, blah. Which leads me to the loot. The loot is straight up the worst part of the game. I've played for about 12 hours and I have received exactly 0 items that make me go, wow, this is so cool, or wow, this is so strong, or wow, this is so fun. Again, in a roguelike game, everything is either a slight damage increase, a slight money increase, a slight pickup radius increase, or a slight health increase. And every single positive pickup that you get is either A, a conditional modifier, or B, a double-edged sword. Plus 10% weapon damage, but only when you're full HP. Plus 10% weapon damage, but only when you're low HP. Wow. There is a big problem in a game when the most exciting item to pick up is an extra life. Like, guys, we've had these bad boys practically since the dawn of gaming. Is this really all you can think of? Again, this wouldn't be as much of an issue if it wasn't a key component in literally half the premise of the entire game. Contrast the loot here to a game like Risk of Rain 2. I know I keep bringing it up, but it's absolutely the most relevant game to compare Returnal to. Consumables in Returnal are essentially one-time use equipment from Risk of Rain 2. In Returnal, you have such exciting effects like convert money drops into health for 30 seconds, and recycle a weapon into money, and slam the ground with a single spike. How about in Risk of Rain 2? Holy yeah, buddy. Oh my God. Woo! And the passive items, oh man, how could I forget the absolutely gargantuan run-saving power spike that I got when I picked up 5% weapon damage per 200 coins capped at 15%, or a 25% chance to save a key on use, and especially plus 5% weapon damage per adrenaline level up to 25%. Okay then, the worst part is, those are the strictly positive passives, of which you typically only get 4 or 5 per run. Most of the time, when you see an item in a run, it's going to be from something that is malignant. Malignant stuff creates malfunctions in your suit, which can then be removed after certain criteria is met, such as picking up another item or killing a certain amount of enemies. As I said at the start, it's all a give and take with this game. Look, I'm all for having conditional modifiers and not strictly positive stuff, but when everything is one of those two things, it's just annoying. Not to mention, the most common pieces of loot that you'll see on the ground are these purple beams, but there are 4 distinctly different items that share the exact same purple beam. A permanent currency like lunar coins called ether, a health restoration that is malignant, a max health increase that has the chance to damage you, and a parasite that has both a positive and negative effect. Why in the world do all of these share the same visual cue? Yes, dear viewer, I am fully aware that the minimap has different icons for each and that the ether coin, which has no downside, can be picked up instantly while the others require you to hold down the interact key, thus making the chance of unintentionally picking up something with a downside highly unlikely, but this is a gosh darn action game. I'm gonna use the freaking visual cues in front of my character before absolutely anything else. The fact that these all share the same visual cue is simply poor design, nothing else. I heckin' love halting my entire flow in an action game, waiting 3 seconds for the text to appear on this item that just dropped because there's no other way to figure it out and what it does, and I can't just pick it up on autopilot because it may have a run ending downside that I have to avoid. You get like 3 purple beams in every single room, by the way. Have fun. If you still don't understand what I'm getting at, I'll raise you this simple question. Would you rather A, have a 20% chance for a morph ball to come out and you take 20 damage every time you press the button, or B, just have a morph ball come out every time you press the button? That's what getting upgrades in Returnal boils down to. Continually stacking negative modifiers against the player under the guise of difficulty, but failing to understand the fine line of balance that is required to make the end result both challenging and, more importantly, engaging. Where have I seen this before? I mentioned a separate game mode earlier. How does that whole thing pan out? Well, after you beat Act 1 of the base Metroidvania Returnal experience, you then unlock the roguelike mode, A Big Tower. And, well, I played it exactly twice. This guy was ripping on the story and going on and on about how the game should be solely combat focused and basically ignores the actual combat-centric mechanic. Yeah, I did, because the combat loop itself is not enough reason for me to stick around in a roguelike that has such terrible loot. Progression is the key in a roguelike. Yes, the act of killing things needs to be fun and satisfying, but if I want to experience good combat without meaningful progression, I'll just go kill some bots at the range in Valorant. The items, again, are easily the worst part about Returnal. And in a roguelike, getting cool items is where the vast majority of that sense of progression comes from. Roguelikes don't have that luxury that standard ARPGs do of having permanent skill trees and gear. Everything comes down to those run-to-run pickups, which for the final time, Returnal just does not do well. All in all, if you missed my verdict at the start, hold off on buying Returnal until it drops to at least $40, but $30 is ideal. The amount and quality of content available is just not worth $60. Still a fun game though. Thanks for watching.